Greetings, fellow barbarians. It is I, Alan Odinson, and you are listening to the Barbarian Lounge podcast. Well, thank you guys for joining us. Please check out our website, thebarbarianlounge.podbean.com. You can subscribe there. Find us on Facebook at The Barbarian Lounge Podcast. Also, you can find us and subscribe on iTunes. You can catch our show there. Also on Stitcher. You can check us out there as well. This is part 2 of our Civil War II, The Coming Breakup of America. If you haven't listened to part 1, please do so. We're going to pick right up where we left off. Take care, fellow barbarians. Enjoy. Item 16. Watch for the emergence of no-go areas for the police in our cities, areas abandoned by the police, and left to the control of the street gangs. I see that just in my area, my small little area. There's police forces that have been moved out. There's an area not far from here, Timmonsville, no longer has a police force. Now the county has to control that area, and the crime has went up. We're seeing many no-go areas throughout the country, especially in areas that are being protested by the police. The police are just pulling out. They're saying, you know what? You don't want us here, we're not going to be here. And now these people are like, oh my God, we need help, we need help. And the police don't ever come. Well, there's a reason the police don't come. If you tell them you don't want them here, and it becomes a threat every time they go into that area, they're not going to show up. So don't call them for help. I always thought it was interesting, looking back through history. You had issues where the Goths, especially, when Rome had established their empire, the Goths wanted to be separate from Rome. And a lot of these Germanic tribal areas, they wanted to be separate from Rome. So what Rome does is build basically a wall. They built a wall and they said, all right, fine. We're sick of dealing with you. You stay on your side of the wall. We'll stay on our side. We'll leave each other alone. The Goths said, thank you. Now we have our freedom. Well, then what ended up happening was Attila the Hun, on the opposite side of the wall that the Goths were on, started pushing forward and started slaughtering the Goths. So what do the Goths do? They run to the wall to Rome and say, please help, let us in, let us in. And the Romans let them in. And eventually the Goths ended up attacking the Romans. My whole thing is, if you say you don't want something, and you say, I want freedom, leave us alone, don't come here anymore, we don't want you here. And you say, okay, you can have it. Don't come running back and saying, please let me in, let me in, let me in. That doesn't work that way. With the Goths, I'm thinking to myself, you guys want to be free? Shit, be free. Be free over there. Defend your land from the Huns. Well, we can't do it. Well, you chose that life, so yeah, there you go. That's what I see with these no-go areas. If you don't want the cops there, by all means, let them pull out. But don't go crying when you've got these criminals and street gangs taking over your area and causing your town to become a war zone. Don't beg for their help then. You don't deserve it. You got exactly what you deserve. 17. Watch for a so-called slave tax refund or some similar vehicle that will automatically subsidize all minorities for life. I have not seen that. We've heard calls of people talking about reparations and all that. That's not going to happen. You don't reparations. I mean, come on. Everybody at some point, every race at some point deserves a reparation. Of course, you've got your African slaves who were, incidentally, were sold by other Africans to the slave traders. So, I don't know if you guys want to look at that. But you've seen issues where Hispanics were used as slaves. The Irish slaves, some of the biggest, most horrific atrocities throughout history with your Irish slaves. Do they deserve reparations too? No, nobody. You're not going to get your reparations. It's not going to happen. We move on past that. You are in control of your life now. If you don't feel like you are, that victim mentality that's been pushed on you by the system, it's time to grow up. It's time to get out and make your own life. Forge your own legacy now. Item 18. Watch for court orders and other schemes mandating more voting districts in which blacks are intentionally a majority. This was one of the reasons for the graphic racial breakdown of the Georgia congressional delegation mentioned earlier in the book. I have not seen this either. I'm not saying it doesn't exist. It could be. I haven't really checked into that to be sure whether or not it's existed, but I haven't seen it. So, move to item 19. Watch other multi-ethnic empires for ethnic violence, a general loss of democracy, increasing poverty, waves of refugees, and their actual breakup in ethnic warfare. Absolutely starting to see this, especially across Europe right now. We're seeing this across Europe with the refugee crisis. We're also seeing now in America the waves of Hispanics coming in. Millions and millions coming in right now. Staggering numbers from what I'm hearing. Sip of my Mitacon here. We're starting to see violence amongst ethnic groups. We're starting to see, especially internal in ethnic groups, we're starting to see a lot of issues with black on black violence. We're starting to see a massive amount of black on white violence. And I know a lot of people don't want to talk about that, but it's something that has to be looked at to understand what is happening in these communities that is causing all of this violence. If you look at some of the stuff by Colin Flaherty, you would be absolutely amazed at the black on white violence that goes on. It doesn't get reported, especially when this whole knockout game was going on. When you look at a lot of the knockout game, what were you seeing? You were seeing young black men knocking out older white people. I mean, that's one of my friends has a funny quote, which it's sadly true, that racism is the crime of noticing things. And that's absolutely true. You know, you say, I noticed that this is happening. I'm noticing that when white people go into this area, they're getting assaulted. Well, that's racist. No, I'm seeing that this is happening. I'm noticing that there's a ton of black on black crime. Well, that's racist. No, it's not. It's not. I'm seeing these things in front of me. We're starting to see a lot with the waves of refugees. We see the refugees. You see Islamic terrorist attacks almost on a daily basis now across the world. Yet they're telling us to bring these same people into the nation, into this country right now when they're saying they're going to strike here. And they say, oh, it's workplace violence. Oh, it's this. Oh, it's that. When a person who pledges allegiance to ISIS guns down a bunch of people, they say, oh, that's just issues with workplace violence, or they have mental issues. No, they were Islamic extremists. Oh, you can't say that. That's racist. Well, I'm just starting to notice these things. I'm noticing that, that this person pledged allegiance to ISIS. I noticed that they picked out a target that ISIS chose in some of their postings online. So we steady see this popping up, yet nobody wants to point at the big elephant in the room. Item 20, watch for the spread of walled suburbs, euphemistically labeled as gated communities. America is taking on the appearance of medieval Europe, and for exactly the same reasons. Marauding criminals, marauding gangs of criminals, and eventually marauding armies of criminals. If you've heard my episode on Doomsday Marauders, you'll know I've talked about this extensively as well. Especially when it comes to a prepping type of situation. If you see America break up, this is what you will see. You will see gangs of marauders. You will see street gangs doing all of these things and attacking these communities. I've always stated that a gated community like that is basically a target. If you live in a gated community, that tells everybody that you have money. Even if you don't have money, they think you have money. They're going to come in there. But we're starting to see this rise up. You're starting to see it even if you don't want to term it as a gated community, you're starting to see people leaving these cities and these urbanized areas and moving to the country because there's a natural feeling that something has happened and they feel safer. Their gates aren't necessarily made of steel and concrete. Their gates are the trees and the isolation that they have in the country. So that is popping up especially right now. So keep an eye out for that for sure. Number 21. Watch for more mind-controlled hoaxes by the establishment media. The establishment media still employs one exposed hoaxer whose favorite deception is announcing that she is broadcasting live from some location while she is in fact inside a closed sound studio, posing in front of a picture of that location. Granted, now, these days, it's not pictures, it's green screens. But there's a lot of hoaxes out there. There's some hoaxes that people claim are hoaxes, and I'm like, I don't know about that, guys. But the mind control in general, the media, the mainstream media, their job is not to report the news. Their job is to report a picture of the news. Their job is to sway minds, sway public opinions. And when you start looking at a lot of the mainstream media, they're all employed, and they have connections to a lot of these parties that are looking to break up America. They're looking to divide America. You go a lot of times, if you just notice like little things they do, like they'll post a picture. I've seen this one a lot. They'll post a picture of Obama from a side view. From the side view, you'll have him standing there, and then in the background you'll have the presidential seal that has a circle of stars, basically. So when they post that picture from the side view with Obama's head, basically, it looks like Obama's standing there with a halo of stars around him, around his head. That's symbolic imagery to give a Christ-like view of him, that he is a savior. Throughout history, all saviors have employed that halo over their head, and that's little tricks that the media will use. They'll use that. They'll use deceptive editing. They'll post half of a video and not show you the other half. It's like I said, their job has always been to create a narrative, because it's all about hearts and minds. You can't say, after World War II, you cannot really say propaganda anymore. You couldn't use the term propaganda because the Germans use it and it was given a negative connotation. Now they use public relations. Public relations is through the media. It's through media sources such as Facebook, such as Twitter. That's why you're starting to see the censorship. Massive amounts of censorship going on. We just saw where Milo Yiannopoulos was pulled off of Twitter, banned from Twitter completely, because he posted something that didn't fit the politically correct paradigm that's out there. I've always said that when America does break up, or when we get that totalitarian leader in there that the media helps put into power, when we get that, it is very important to understand these people fall into the category, these media personalities fall into the category of sympathizers. They fall into the category of traitors, because that is what they are. They are a traitor to their nation. They are a traitor to their people, and they should be treated accordingly as traitors are treated. Item number 22. Watch for the increasing percentage of minorities in our military, the use of foreigners in our military, the use of UN troops on our soil, or even the establishment of an American Foreign Legion. I have not seen the American Foreign Legion. Minorities in the military, it happens. You know, this is 2016. It happens. There's nothing wrong with minorities in the military. It's not like you've got... because when you have minorities in the military, they fall into the category of being an American. They're an American. They're in the American military. They're not... Their identity is that of an American. It's not that they're a minority anymore. Use of foreigners in the military, we're starting to see a little bit of that. Granted, there's always bad apples amongst the group. However, for the most part, these people are assimilating into that of an American. UN troops on our soil, on the other hand, that is something we're seeing a lot. Just recently, a picture traveling down 95 of an MRAP, with a white MRAP with the UN logo painted on the side, with the big letters in black, UN, on the side. Why is that here in America? Why are we seeing UN vehicles here in America? Why is the United Nations imposing laws and treaties and stuff here on the American people? A lot of people want to put nationalism in a bad light. However, you have to understand, when you put your nation first, when you have an idea of nationalism, that is where you start pushing these oppressive one world groups out. That is the power that a nationalistic ideal has. It's always been the power, and it's always been something that scared people. Whenever you have a leader who starts pushing an idea of being nationalistic, that sends shivers down the controlling power structure's spine. It makes them very afraid. They're like, oh man, when they do that, they don't want to be part of the globalist system. Item 23, watch for more out-of-court settlements in cases of alleged racial discrimination. I have not seen a whole lot of that, and I can't really offer a whole lot of statistics on that. Does it happen? Yeah, but it probably happens across the board as well. As far as out-of-court settlements, I don't know what really constitutes that as some sort of issue that will bring us closer to Civil War II. I will say, now that my memory's kicking in a little bit, I will say that there was a massive settlement that was reached. I believe it was in Baltimore, in Ferguson. I think that's Mike. I don't know if it was Mike Brown's mom, but they received a massive settlement in one of those ideals where one of those African American gentlemen was resisting arrest, and he was killed in some manner. I believe it was Mike Brown. My memory escapes me at the moment. But there was a massive, several $million settlement reached between the state and these people. It didn't go to in the family. It didn't go to court. I don't recall it going to court. If it did go to court, it escapes my mind at the time. But that's a massive settlement for someone who was committing a crime. They died in the commission of a crime, an assault. It's absolutely mind-boggling. Item 24, watch for more restrictions on freedom of speech by the government and the establishment media. This will drive non-establishment people underground and radicalize them. We're absolutely starting to see this. I just spoke of Milo Yiannopoulos being banned from Twitter because of a freedom of speech issue. Especially with the establishment media right now, we're seeing people removed off of air. We're seeing people stifled. Facebook right now, which is kind of one of the largest quote-unquote nations in the world. Oh, let me take a sip here. One of the, oh man, that Mitocon's awesome. Really one of the largest nations for free speech in the world is massive censorship on there. You post something that Facebook doesn't like, man, they'll ban you or remove your account. It's absolutely insanity. But we're starting to see the rise now. With the more we see the bringing down of and the silencing of people, we're starting to see the rise of alternative media. We're starting to see the rise of podcasts. That's one of the reasons this podcast was born. Was because I'm not going to be silenced. I'm not going to shut up. I'm not going to shut up about a lot of these issues because they need to be talked about. The dialogue needs to happen. When we stop talking, that's when we start fighting. Item 25, watch for police to increasingly abandon their traditional uniforms for ones that resemble military or secret police uniforms in their dark color or camouflage, military helmets, opaque face shields, and absence of name tags. These costumes are meant to intimidate, as are the tactics of using paid perjurers, known as informers, paid liars, known as expert witnesses, wiretaps, boots kicking indoors, agent provocateurs, attack dogs, tanks, gas, and entrapment, followed by assassination by sniper. Wow, that's pretty intense there. But I talked about that earlier. I'm not a fan of these uniforms. I think it's a bad call. I think it sends a bad message to the people, and it's definitely something that should be changed. Item 26, watch for clandestine groups of white officers to form within our federal, state, and local police, groups similar to the Resistors and the Green Berets. I predict that these white law enforcement resistor groups will be clandestine because those openly holding such opinions are being harassed and are fired by higher up to enforce unconstitutional action programs and to politicize our law enforcement agencies. We have seen issues, especially where certain higher-ups in law enforcement are being pushed out. I have friends in law enforcement, and I know for a fact that they have been silenced on many issues. They can't. It's got to the point where if they post something on Facebook, they're getting reported, and they have to go in for meetings where they sit down with their superior or whatever, and that superior says, "Hey, I heard you post this. Don't post that shit no more." And, and they get put on. Put on sort of a probationary period to where these guys are just starting to either shut up, which that's exactly what they want. They want you to shut up. That should be the goal. That should be the catchphrase of these people who are seeking to silence us. It should just say shut up. The DNC, the Antifa, the communists, the socialists, Hillary Clinton. That's what it should say. It should just say shut up. Because that's what they want. They want you to shut up. When you start shutting up, that's when they start winning. People say a lot of times, why do you guys keep talking about this? Or who cares? That's the problem right there. When you stop caring, when you start shutting up, when you stop using your voice, that's when they win. That's the whole idea, is to get you to shut up. Don't talk about it anymore. We don't want to hear about it. Why? I heard somebody talking about this morning, talking about the whole flag issue here in South Carolina. The whole flag issue. They were saying, why don't they just let it go? Well, why don't they just let this die out? That's the problem. When you stop talking about it, it no longer becomes an issue. As soon as you become quiet, that's when apathy sets in, and that's when you lose the fight. That's why these issues have to continue to be talked about. And I know that this is listed as issues with white law enforcement. And we're starting to see where white law enforcement is starting to have issues in the law enforcement circles. We're starting to see where they're having issues because we have different groups are seeking to demonize them as this whole idea of, if a black guy gets shot, even if they pull a gun out of the guy's pocket, they're like, oh, he was on the ground with his hands up. Yeah, the first shots you heard were through his pocket because he was digging in his pocket trying to get the gun out to shoot these guys. He was a convicted felon. It's crazy. And then white police officers start dying. The more this starts happening, the more you're going to see these groups start to form. And then you're going to create the very racists that you claimed that they were being. They're going to start to hate minorities because they're being attacked by minorities. So what groups like Black Lives Matter don't understand, it's kind of like the idea of when you go overseas and you drone strike a wedding because you hear there are two Islamic extremists, two head members of Al-Qaeda at the wedding, and you blow up a tent where a wedding is going on, and two heads of Al-Qaeda die and 30 civilians die. Every single one of those 30 civilians that you killed, you just radicalized their family. Because now they're going to hate America because you killed their father, their mother, their son, whatever. You killed them just to get these two people. And granted, you can make arguments as to whether or not it's worth it. That's not my call. I'm just telling you what you're doing. Because think about it. If you're here and Chinese troops were randomly drone striking church services you were having because there were two heads of a resistance movement there, do you think that all those people would really like the Chinese after they did that? If they did that to your family, if your family was in that church and they got blown up by a drone strike, wouldn't you become radicalized pretty quick? This is what's going to happen in the law enforcement if you start having these black nationalist groups, which those are the ones that are actually pulling the triggers in a lot of these issues, but the media doesn't want to talk about that. The more you start shooting these people, these white officers, even police officers in general, you're going to start to see these groups rise up. And that's going to be dangerous for everybody. You're going to get what you ask for. We don't want that. We don't want that here in this nation. Item 27, watch for an arm of the federal government charged with promoting racist affirmative action, such as Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, to acquire agents that carry guns and have power to make arrests. I haven't seen that. I cannot really comment on that. It's possible. I'm not saying it can't be, but under Hillary, it could happen. Item 28 is a big one. This is a big one right here. Watch for the collapse of the U.S. dollar as the world's premier currency. This will be a signal that will confirm our status as a third world nation. Foreigners will refuse to continue to buy our federal government debt instruments denominated in U.S. dollars. See, this is a huge issue right now. What a lot of people don't realize is one of the things that keeps the U.S. afloat right now, from an economic standpoint, is the fact that we have the world reserve currency. The dollar is the world reserve currency. But I can tell you, if you keep track of current economic trends, that is slowly moving out right now. We're seeing with Russia and China are starting to trade with their own currency. You're starting to see the BRICS Union starting to trade amongst themselves in their own currency. The dollar climbs, the dollar drops. You have to understand that the dollar right now is pretty much worth the paper that it's printed on. And you have all of these countries starting to sell off U.S. debt. Why is that? Why are they starting to buy gold? And they're starting to sell off U.S. debt. They know something's coming. Could do an entire show on the collapse of the U.S. dollar. That is coming. When the dollar collapses, you're going to see massive changes here in this nation. You're going to see issues like Germany had after World War I with the Weimar Republic, where it was taking a wheelbarrow full of money just to buy a loaf of bread. That's the nature of when this hyperinflation hits, and that's what's going to happen. We're going to have all these dollar bills are not going to be worth anything. Item 29, watch for growing geographic segregation and its increasing mention in the establishment press. We see this somewhat in certain areas. We do see the mainstream media pushing kind of a idea of a segregation. As I just spoke a minute ago, we hear all the time about this idea of a white privilege, and white privilege get to the back of the line here. It's kind of insane. We haven't seen much of item 29 yet, but if things keep going the way they are with this race-based politics that's being pushed with the current Democratic Party, it's absolutely going to be here before we know it. And that's not going to be good. It's not going to be good once this starts happening, because, as I said just a minute ago, when it comes to creating that which you're trying to fight against, if you try to create this idea that all whites are racist, eventually you're going to start turning all whites racist. If you start pushing this idea that all cops are killing black people, and then you have these Nation of Islam groups and all these other groups starting to kill white police officers, guess what? You're going to start creating that which you fear. Item 30, watch for signs that the global military equation and American dominance in it are being challenged. One such sure sign would be the acquisition of a blue water navy by the Japanese. The Japanese cannot be a global military power without a blue water navy, and Japan cannot have serious blue water navy without aircraft carriers. The same applies to a Japanese alliance with China or Russia. We're seeing right now, especially in the Sea of Japan, right now, the conflict developing between China and the United States over the South China Sea area. We're starting to see that really beginning to pick up. And little things like that is how issues begin with attacks from other nations. And understand this, when these other nations attack, when they do attack a superpower, it's always going to be with something preemptive. I contend that it will be a preemptive military strike, such as an EMP here in this nation. That's what I think will happen when it does happen. But it's important to understand issues with history, especially what's going on right now in the South China Sea. Whenever, you have to understand, when Pearl Harbor happened, Japan did not just wake up one morning and say, let's attack the U.S. I know that's what you were taught in history, that it was a surprise and everything. But that's not actually true. What actually happened was that Japan had an oil embargo. Japan was in conflict with China at the time. But the U.S. actually put an oil embargo on Japan and crippled their economy. Now, there are some people that were saying that the U.S. was trying to get into war and this was a way to provoke the Japanese. That's an argument that could be had. However, there was an oil embargo put on Japan that absolutely crippled them. And Japan started making threats saying, look, guys, you got to lift this oil embargo. We're not bothering you, and I don't know why you want to start getting involved in our business over here, but you need to back off. And the U.S. did not. It didn't happen. So we started seeing saber rattling from Japan. Japan started making threats. I've seen newspaper articles where Japan was like, where it said Japan mobilizing army for attack on the U.S. You see all these newspaper articles. Yet they want us to believe that it was just oh my goodness, I can't believe they attacked. No. There's a lot of evidence that shows they knew that Pearl Harbor was going to happen, even to the point where they knew Japan was on the way. You can make an argument that the U.S. wanted to get in the war, but hey, that's probably an argument for another show. Probably need a guy with a little better knowledge of history on that subject than I. But we're starting to see that now. Understand that when these conflicts start happening over this vital resource area between China and the U.S., you have to understand what that's setting up. You're starting to see conflict developing there. And when it happens, when you have to understand how much of the United States debt that China owes, when China decides to cash in on that, they decide to cash in on their debt, the U.S. is going to owe them a lot of money, which the U.S. cannot pay. When that happens, what are they going to have? What do you suppose is collateral on that debt? What do you think it is? It's probably land. Where do you think they're going to get that land from? Do you think the U.S. is going to give up that land? They're going to give up areas here in the U.S., which there's a lot of rumors that they already are starting to do that, but I'd have to research that more. What's going to happen? There's going to be a conflict. And it's going to be a violent conflict. And I guarantee you it's going to be set off by preemptive strike from one of those two countries, possibly Russia or China, or Russia and China, with an EMP attack. Item 31, watch for the breakup of Canada. I have not seen any sort of breakup in Canada. I don't know a whole lot about Canada. But, hey, it is what it is. Item 32, watch for the increased flow of Americans immigrating to Canada. Now, I have seen that. I've heard of a lot of Americans moving up towards Canada to get out of here. I've heard of there's a massive amount of Americans repatriating from this country to other areas. I've got a guy right now, as I speak on this podcast, who's trying to get me to move to be his security down in the Dominican Republic because he has a compound down there. He's looking to leave this nation and head to the Dominican Republic to live. He's got a massive amount of land, all this stuff like that, and he's wanting me to go to the Dominican Republic with him. I've got roots here. I'm not leaving this nation. I'll fight here. I'll die here. This just as my family has throughout history. So don't worry, the Barbarian Lounge is not going to the DR, my friends. We're staying right here in the SC. But we're seeing this. We're seeing Americans leaving, looking to try and find ways to get the hell out of here. And that's signs of the times. That's people's natural feelings. When you see animals get uneasy in an area when there's a predator around, you see all the animals start moving away and going to different locations. That's what we're seeing right here. Item 33, watch for the political and legal organizations formed along ethnic lines that will parallel and ultimately displace their official rivals. For instance, watch for organizations with names like the Association of Hispanic States or Black Mayors Conference. One thing I can relate to this is we are starting to see, we just saw recently that we had the Nation of Islam call for, not Nation of Islam, that one of the black nationalist groups, which they're probably associated with Nation of Islam, one of the black nationalist groups was calling for a mass migration towards the southern states. Because their whole idea is we'll go and we'll take over these states, and if we move in, we'll move white people out of here. And I tell you right now, one of them was my state of South Carolina, and my friends, that ain't gonna happen. I would not advise doing that in the least bit, because there's some people here that are not gonna leave. But I think most of this is just rhetoric for the most part, but that shows you the type of ideals that these groups are starting to push. And you will see it start to pop up. You will see it begin to leak into your community. And that's something that needs to be handled on a community level, to decide who you want in your community and who you don't. And as I've said before, there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with having black communities. There's nothing wrong with having Asian communities. I actually want to see that. I want to see these people get in contact with their culture, with their even have their own economy amongst their own groups. But when you start imposing your will on another group, on another tribe, if you will, when you start doing that, well, there's a problem there. We can work together. We can live apart and work together. There's nothing wrong with that. And if you all can assimilate into each other's culture, by all means, live together. Item 34. Watch for more help wanted ads stating that job applicants must be bilingual. Yes, we're absolutely seeing that right now. I read that to you, and everyone probably kind of smirks at that because you see that. A bilingual job is definitely something that people are looking for, and that's just mainly because of the massive influx of illegal immigrants over the border. And when if Hillary Clinton gets in, you will see amnesty. If amnesty happens, and that will happen with the Democratic win in November, if amnesty happens, Katie, bar the door. We're already seeing right now where they've been preparing us for years. How many of you get a new item or whatever, and you start going through the instructions, and you see, like, you have to flip through 3 different pages before you find the English instructions, because it's written in all kind of different language, with the first one being Spanish. If you go to your grocery store right now, you grab a box of food, there's Spanish ingredients and English ingredients all over. The name is written in English, written in Spanish. This is preparing you. They've been preparing you for a while. You can't just take people and throw them into something because they'll notice. But if you use a tiptoe, I call it the totalitarian tiptoe. If you use the totalitarian tiptoe and slowly move along, people do not realize. It's kind of like the idea of the boiling frog. You put a frog in boiling water, he'll jump out. If you put the frog in there and slowly start heating it up, he'll slowly boil himself and doesn't even realize it's happened. Item 35, watch for indications that the UN is assuming the role of a world government. We talked about that one, as it says, and that the U.S. is losing even more of its national sovereignty to the UN. We talked about that as well. Absolutely starting to see that with the UN treaties. They're trying to push this whole idea behind it. It's wide open. It's right there for the world to see. Item 36, this is the last item, item 36. Watch for a certain picture. We've all seen this picture countless times before. A picture from Beirut, Budapest, Afghanistan, Vietnam, Sri Lanka, Yugoslavia, Somalia. A burnout tank. Perhaps a charred corpse of a crewman protruding through the hatch. A jubilant rebels posing atop a tank waving assault flags. Assault rifles and a flag. I said assault flag. That's funny. I've seen some memes about assault flags. It says, someday we shall see this picture in our newspapers yet again, and this time taken on American soil. Recently, with the Black Lives Matter protests, we've seen vehicles smashed. We saw recently where a police officer had his vehicle, a Molotov cocktail was thrown on. It was set ablaze. We've seen violence from the Antifa. We've seen spray painting of things. We've seen communist flags and Mexican flags flying here in America. All these things are starting to be seen. We're seeing that right now. So our video of the week, I'm gonna go ahead and throw out that video of the week I talked about before with the insane girl talking about the your fucking, this is the white girl now talking about your fucking white male privilege to speak over a non-binary trans female. I can't even fucking say it. It's absolutely ridiculous. This is the insanity that's being sent through our schools right now. So I'm going to post that video on the link. I'm not going to play it here. Actually, I will play it, because we've already run the hell over. If you're still with me, thank you very much. I'm going to play it real quick, and let's play it, and we'll get right back to you.
Cameras, please. This is the perfect fucking example.
You guys throw water balloons, burn flags? Get the fuck out of here.
Get the fuck out of here.
Get the fuck out of here.
Cameras, please. This is the perfect example of how a white privileged male can speak over a non-binary trans female.
Non-binary trans female. What the fuck is that? Some made-up thing that they taught you in college?
This is the perfect example of why they can speak over a non-binary trans femme person. They can speak over a non-binary trans femme person, and they can see nothing wrong with it. They can see nothing wrong. These people can see nothing wrong with speaking over transgender people. They don't see anything wrong as cis people with speaking over us. Our voices are always silenced. Our voices are always silenced, and they never let us speak. They never let us speak. And when we're angry, they act like they can be entitled to police how we're angry. We're angry because we're tired of being spoken over.
I believe the word you were looking for was, we're tired of being spoken.
People are tired of being talked over. People of color are tired of being talked over by fucking white men like that.
It also bears noting that all these people protesting are white. And you know, even though she's tired of being spoken over, she won't shut up.
Shut that cunt's mouth or I'll come over there and fuck start her head.
Whoa, alright, man. Jeez, alright, we're cutting the clip off. We'll get back to the show. Just calm down, enjoy your drink, and let me finish the show. Damn. After you hear that insanity, man, these people are going crazy. And we're on the march, my friends. But this is going to be the last call. It's the last call. So I read off this checklist, and of the 36 things that I stated there, I ask you, go back through them, write them down, read the book, go through them, and tell me how many of them are coming to pass right now. How many of them are we seeing? How many of these checklist items, of these 36 items, I would probably say that 33 out of the 36 are happening or have happened, and the other 3 are in the process of happening or being built at the time. My friends, if you do not think that the coming breakup of America is happening right now, you've got blinders on. We're heading that direction. It can be changed. We can absolutely change it, but we have to make these changes. You could make the argument, as that of a barbarian, as that of an outsider, that we want it to fall apart. That could be it. We could sit here and roast marshmallows while everything falls apart. I am not saying that one is better than the other. However, if you say you're waiting for things to fall apart, but you have no preparations or any mindset for what happens after things fall apart, you are fighting a losing battle. You have lost. Because the time for making these changes, we're heading there. We are a few steps from reaching the top of the hill where we can see the whole battlefield before us. If you have not begun making steps already, if you have not begun making preparations, you're already failing the game. Thank you guys for joining me. I enjoyed doing this. This was kind of a long one here, but I think it's well worth talking about. We need to talk about these things. And I advise you, there's a lot more to this book that I would advise you to definitely read, where it breaks down things even more. Like I said, they're going to try and scare you and tell you it's some kind of horrible racist book. It's absolutely crazy. I read off these checklists here. I mean, is it a racist book because they talked about different ethnicities as it relates to white ethnicities? Well, again, we're talking about racism. What is racism I talked about before that my friend said? Racism, the crime of noticing. We're noticing things. There's nothing wrong with noticing things. No one race was condemned more than the other. If anything, we're establishing what those other races need to do. Everything I read here, it doesn't matter what color you are. It Doesn't matter what ethnicity, doesn't matter what race, what culture you present. Everything I read on here affects all of you. Because when you start changing the things that you do, when you start changing the way you interact in society, when you start changing the way that you interact in your tribe, around other people of other tribes, when you start changing that, you can start altering the way this war is going to end. Or if it even begins. If you're not willing to do that, then my friends, you're heading straight towards civil war. Thank you guys for joining me again. I really enjoyed this talk, and I hope you did too. So until next time, my fellow barbarians, the lounge is closed.